and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Tasneem Abrahams. I'm the founder of the Private Practice Growth Club, and on this channel, I share tips, tools, and tutorials for health professionals starting and growing a private practice in South Africa. Today's lovely guest is Erika, and Erika is the co-founder of an organization called MedE Recruit, which is a recruitment agency specifically focusing on the health and medical industry. Welcome, Erika. I'm so happy to have you as a guest because employment is one of the topics that comes up a lot. There's a lot of questions around ethics, but then there's also the aspect of actually recruiting someone, right? So I'm so glad to have you here and for you to share your expertise. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Tasneem. It's actually great to be on your channel. It's a privilege to just share a bit of information with the practices, and I hope I can share some valuable information to everybody. So, like you said, my name's Erika, Erika Myberg. I'm the owner and founder of MedE Recruit. So, yes, I'm married. I've got 3 children, lovely husband, long-term. We've been dating since I was 19, so that's many moons ago. And, it's just a pleasure to actually be in this business and to do what I do. My work is also my hobby, unfortunately. But I do like to just grow and investigate and just, I don't ever want to be left behind. So I always keep on going and looking at everything, what's happening and what's new. So that's me, that's Erika.
So tell me a bit about your background. How did you get into recruitment?
Yeah, you know what? It's actually interesting. I don't necessarily have an HR background. So I used to work for a large optical company for about 20 years. I literally started ground level. I was a consultant and I just worked for this company for many years, and I literally grew with the practices. We opened many practices and I grew with the company, and I eventually became a practice manager. After that, I became an area manager, and even, after that, operations manager. And I did, all of this for 20 years. And over this period of time, I just realized there's such a need for people and good staff in practices. When you think of practices, in my opinion, a person, the people, the staff make the practice.
Absolutely.
So it's so crucial to actually just find great people for medical practices. Okay, so whether you need a medical professional, or if it's a practice manager or a front staff, you need great people, and no matter the medical industry you're in. So, that's what I'm doing. Then I left the company after 20 years at the end of 2018, and I actually bought into recruiting consultancy. And then at that point, I was like, I really love doing this. I started MedE Recruit because I saw the gap in the market. I realized that there's such a need for people to hire medical professionals, and not everybody is actually comfortable doing it themselves. A lot of people can, but there's actually a lot of people that can't do it and comfortably do it, or don't want to do it. So we decided to come into the market and service the medical industry. We've got a very big footprint into dentistry, and then also into general medical, GPs, and so forth. So we do private practice recruiting. We also expanded to practice sales. So I got involved with a partner to assist practices to sell their medical practices, because once again, it's not just about you sell a practice. And then we've got a partner to assist with locums. Locums is a very interesting market. I noted on your Instagram that a lady spoke about the difference between a locum and somebody working, I would say, as an independent practitioner. Yeah, that's right. So we've got a partner to assist with the locum. So we don't generally do short-term locums. We will, however, do longer-term contracts for practices. And then we do a bit of international recruiting as well. So many people just contacted us and like, listen, we need people internationally. There just seem to be a lot of staff challenges, not only in South Africa, but also abroad.
So what types of staff positions do you usually recruit for?
You know what? We literally start from the ground, so if you need a frontliner, if you need somebody to man the admin or the dental practice receptionist with medical assistants, dental assistants, technologists, HPCSA registered practitioners, SANC registered nurses, so literally anything you can think of medically. We also assist, if you need a physiotherapist, we've done some mental health recruiting as well. So literally everything, the big scope of medical and healthcare in South Africa.
So now tell me something, as a practice owner, so you've obviously, because you've worked with lots of practice owners, you've worked in this recruiting space, so you know both from the the employer and the employee side, people who are looking for jobs and those who are looking to fill positions. Yeah. But I want to know from a practice owner's point of view, how do you know if you are ready to expand your team and make your first hire? Because I think that is something that practice owners often struggle with. They get to a point where they have reached their capacity, but now how do you know if you're ready to make your first hire?
That's a very hard one. But you know what? I always say, the moment that you feel so stressed out and that you just cannot do everything required, or your book is so full that you literally, you are booked months in advance and there's more people phoning you and they say, listen, I need, and you cannot schedule them, in a good time. So I always say, even if your staff tell you, listen, you know what, I can't get to everything. I'm like, I work late, you work late as the owner, you're up in the morning at 6 to try and do everything. That's a very, if you also don't enjoy what you do as much, then you may be in need of somebody to assist you. So it's often a very big leap, and people are so scared to actually employ somebody extra or another person. But sometimes that can be the best decision you actually make for your practice.
But now here's the thing, right? Because when you are a solo business owner, so whether you are a health professional or just an entrepreneur out there selling cake or whatever the case may be, when you are doing everything yourself, you are wearing all the hats. So in a usual business, when you have an organogram, you have your person, your CEO at the top, and then you have your HR person, your finance person, marketing person, and then underneath you have all the workers, right? So you are all of those things in the organogram. So now let's say you are feeling overwhelmed because you can't keep up with the note keeping, you can't keep up with the patient load, you can't keep up with the admin, the billing, the marketing of practice, and. So you think, okay, maybe I need help. I need to pay somebody. I need to employ somebody. How do you know what should be your first hire? How do you know whether you should get a practice manager versus another practitioner versus, I don't know, an admin lady? Yeah. How do you know what should be your first hire?
For some people it's obvious, but for a lot of people it's not. I would say, there's a saying going like, know what you don't know. And, and I can even talk about myself. I used to work solo as well. We are now 6 ladies in the team, but I used to be on my own as well. And my personal opinion is that I hired people to do things that I either weren't as good with or that I did not enjoy as much. So I think you need to identify, know what you don't know. If you realize that you've done all your medical aid billing and you messed up, you kind of don't get your money in as fast as you can, or you've lost a lot of money, or it's money written off, okay, that's a good sign. Please hire an admin lady. If you're on top of that and you enjoy that and sitting at night and billing and you are booked months ahead, maybe get another practitioner in, even if it's a low or a short-term person, to see if that's actually, you don't always need to hire permanent immediately. Rather maybe check it out, get somebody in. Is it working for you? Are you as comfortable as you thought you would be or not? And then take it from there. So I always tell people, don't be over hasty and really make sure that you hire the right person. And sometimes you're lucky. You get somebody that come in and they just, they're so awesome. They take all that stress off you. But it doesn't always happen. So you need to be really careful when you decide what to do. And if you've made a mistake, just step back and start over again, But I will highly recommend a solo practitioner to just start very slowly, half day, temporary, check it out, make sure you're comfortable before you go ahead.
But now let's say that you decide to bring somebody on, now you to relieve some of the overwhelm. But that, if you've been doing everything yourself all along and like everything is in your head and you do things, you just do things because you know what you need to do, right? It's kind of like if you are the one running the household and your husband says, what can I do to help? Then you're like, I shouldn't have to tell you. You should know. But the thing is, they don't know, because if you've been doing everything and you've got all this stuff running
so many
around in your head,
years.
they can't like read your minds, right? So it's the same thing when you bring somebody on into your business. Now you have to hand over the reins, but that requires that you must be able to tell them what to do. And also you need to know, like, what is it that you need them to do? So before you before you actually put out your advert out there, what would you say from your experience makes the recruitment process a lot more smooth if employers have certain things in place? What are some of those things that you should have in place before you actually put a job ad out there?
Yeah, you know what, I think we are now talking more about a solo practitioner and somebody that want to bring in the first hire. It's crucial that that person actually come in, you look them eye to eye, and you really make them understand what you are about. And there must be kind of a connection, in my opinion, especially if you're a small business like that. If you're one-on-one and I'm getting somebody in, I'm going to check you out from head to toe, and I'm going to make sure that you are perfect for what I need. And literally make sure that that person's got the same ethics and values and that they understand what you need. So if you are really patient-focused and if that's important to you, and that should be, you want somebody that have exactly the same mindset and that actually think the same way as you do. If you meet somebody and you start having that conversation, you will be able to identify, yeah, you know what, we are on the same page, or maybe not. And I think that's really important, that even as a one-man show, that you've got a culture. You are the culture of the business. And that now need to be carried over to the rest of the staff as you grow. And so I would really make sure that you really know what you need. Identify your needs and make sure that you kind of structure that, look at exactly what you need, and then advertise accordingly. But you also don't want to be caught off guard that you actually now find somebody that's perfect and you're not prepared. You maybe don't have a room set for them, or there's no space for them to sit, or you don't, have a telephone ready for them, or whatever the case may be. So you must think ahead, because it's not only the expense of the staff member, but there's a few things that need to change. But you can do it step by step, and you don't have to go in full on and hire 20 people and buy 20 laptops. You don't have to do that. That's not necessarily the approach. But maybe just, one step, one thing at a time, think it through, and make sure that the staff's really on board with what you are about and what your business culture is about.
You really got me thinking now, because I didn't even think of that before, but the logistics, like I hear you saying that before you hire somebody, you need to be clear on what you want and what you need and what tasks need to be done. But there's that logistical aspect to it that you mentioned, which, like, I didn't even think of that. Like, if you are a solo entrepreneur and you may be just using your cell phone, if you bring, say, an admin person in, you need another phone, for example, or another laptop. And then obviously being in the medical space, there's a whole lot of other things that you have to be aware of, like confidentiality and that. So like maybe another practitioner can have access to clinical notes, but not a non-HPCSA registered professional unless they have a specific role. And then do you have the puppy in place and all of that? So before you are ready to have some, if you're going to put the ad out there, once you employ somebody, do you have everything in place that person can then do their job, they will have everything they need to do the job that you're expecting them to do, which is a great point. I never even thought of that before. Yeah.
And you know what, Tasneem, something else that people need to consider is, although you're only hiring one person, you must get everything in place. Even you may have to start paying pay as you earn, UIF and that type, something that you maybe never thought about. And then also things like your point of sale. So you're using whatever medical program you are using. that will be a slight bit of an extra expense. You can maybe do the settings, and maybe they can't see the clinical notes, depending on who you hire. And then also, I think there's just a lot of things to consider. But it just, I just get excited by this. If I think of that, it really excites me. Not everybody feel that way, however. They maybe get a bit nervous. But, that's business for you, and that's how you're going to grow your practice.
So now let's say you've now put all those things in place, and now you've going to put an advert out, and now people start contacting you. And usually when you put a job ad out, you get like loads of applications. How do you know how to choose the right person? Like, what should you look out for? I mean, there's one thing to say, okay, when you meet the person, you get a feeling, but before you even shortlist who you're going to invite for an interview, what should you look out for, like in people's CVs, or if you do a pre-screening interview, like what kinds of questions should you ask? And then when you do get to the interview stage, are there like certain questions that should be in every interview that will also help with that process?
Yeah, absolutely. You've actually asked quite a few questions now, but I think firstly, you need to identify your role. So I just want to take one example. So let's say you decide to hire administrator, a lady that's going to come in, do reception, do your admin, submit medical claims, just to take that burden off you. So let's just work with one of those, candidates. So the reality is, like you said, you're going to get millions of applications. Like, you get so many, you're so overwhelmed, you just don't even know where to start. And that's where a recruiter come in. So phone me, I can help you. But anyway, before you do that, let's say you do all of this on your own, you will actually need to have a few points. You want somebody with, let's say, 5 years experience. They've got a good understanding of XYZ program. They must be a very good communicator. Let's say 2 or 3 languages that you may require. They must live in the area, because you don't want them to travel 50 k's and be late for work, or whatever the case may be. So you're going to have a few pointers. And I will literally work through each of the CVs. And if you don't tick all those boxes, the initial boxes, I'm going to kick you out. Okay, so that's the first I generally look at. Is there's a few points, let's look at that. Okay, now let's say you've shortlisted 10 candidates. Now all the hard work starts, because now you need to, I initially only do a phone call first, because you don't want to set up a Zoom meeting and maybe it's not worth it, or the candidate actually live in Timbuktu and they're not really interested in moving or whatever. So I've then phoned this person and really asked them a few crucial questions, like, where do you stay? Because it's not always obvious and clear. What is your salary expectation? Oh, 50,000? Oh, no, sorry, I can't afford you. So you're out immediately. Or you can only speak one language and I need you to speak 2 languages, for instance. Oh, that's not going to work for me. Okay, let's move on. So you really need initially to be quite harsh with the process. There's a few standards, and you don't want to play around with that. Then once you've got these 10 people that you start phoning, you can probably scale them down easily to your 4 best candidates. Meet with them, because now you want to look at this person and see if they really, if this is, what you see on their CV, is it actually them? Do you like them? Do they like you? Are they comfortable in what you can offer them? Because the reality is there's a big difference between a solo practice and a big, humongous corporate company, where you're going to work, you're going to get benefits, the company's stable, and you're comfortable. Some people only want that. But if I tell you, listen, you must take a chance on me. I'm a small business. You're my first ever employee. I mean, it's going to be a different type of candidate that's going to be interested.
Yeah.
And they may be going to also want even a little bit less money, which is okay, which is actually fine. So, and that's the type of things that you will need to look at, because a lot of people, when they see an advert in their head, it's a big, humongous company. They're going to have all these benefits. It's going to be, everything. Work with 700 other people, or 50 or 20 or whatever. And it's not like that. So I think just honesty about your situation. Who are you? What do you expect? What you can offer will kind of eliminate, when you work with a few 10 candidates, for instance, you're going to get to about 2-3 candidates that's really, I think I must meet these 3 girls or people that I think have the skill, and then take it from there.
I'm just laughing internally because while you are explaining this process, in my mind, I'm picturing buying a car on like We Buy Cars or something like that, because it's kind of like that, right? When you are in the market for a car, firstly, you have to understand what your budget is. Then you have to understand like what you're going to use the car for, because if you are going to use it to transport like items, then it's different. Like, for example, we are a family of 6, so we need a 6-seater as opposed to my everyday car where I'm just going to the shop every day. I just need to be able to like park easily. So I need a small car. So you need to know what the role of the car is, what you're going to use it for. And then you need to go onto the website and almost use those advanced filters, which is kind of what you're talking about, but for a human being, right?
Absolutely.
So you're going to have to like kind of decide what your advanced filters are. So there'll be things that are non-negotiables. Yeah. And then there are things that are nice to have, but it's okay if the person doesn't like tick that box, right? So as much as I would love to have Bluetooth in my car, for example, it's something that I can live without, as opposed to I need a car that's fuel efficient because the fuel price is really high. So that's kind of like what it sounds like, the way you describe it. Car shopping, now, human shopping instead.
Human shopping, it actually sounds quite weird, but and that's the reality. But you know what I also want to add to this, and this is something that you won't get with the car. The car's not really going to talk back. I think often practices and employers forget that this candidate that you are now really interested in must kind of feel the same way about you. And you also need to sell yourself, but also not oversell. Do you know what I'm saying? So that person, if they leave a job, they've been stable and comfortable for 10 years. Now they are leaping. They want to move forward. They've got, the new adventure, whatever. And they don't realize that you are solo and maybe, not as secure as they were with their previous employer. Or maybe you are much more strict, or you've got different values than the previous employer. They're not necessarily going to come, okay, you like me, oh, I definitely like you, I will absolutely come and work for you. It's definitely a difference. And that's often, unfortunately, employers forget that. And you also, as with any relationship, Tasneem, people need to kind of connect. So Absolutely. It's so important that you connect with the right person. So if you've got the best HR manager in your company and everybody loves them and they're awesome and they kind of, everybody want to work there. But the moment they step into the business and it's nothing like the initial contact, they're going to be disappointed and they're not going to stay around, long enough. So that's why what you say and how you present yourself should be honest and open. And vice versa for the candidate as well, because you don't want to sit there and you're all wonderful, the candidate's friendly, they're going to love my patients, and they too, I'm sitting there, I'm horrible, I'm like, don't even want to pick up the phone because I actually hate people. You know what I'm saying? So it's so important to just be honest, both sides, both parties. Process.
And I think it's because it's something you mentioned earlier, which is culture. And I think people forget that culture in a workplace is not only about where there's multiple people. You also have your own work culture that you want to create. In fact, I created the 5 stages of private practice. And one of the things, it's the root stage, shoot, grow, blossom, and prune stage. And in the grow stage, which is the place where you're starting to grow and you generally need to hire staff, one of the things that I mentioned in there is that is from the mindset point of view, you need to be very clear on what kind of culture you want to create in your practice before you bring staff in. Because then, like you say, there's the intangible. Somebody might be on paper, they might have all the skills, they might be excellent at what they do, highly skilled, highly experienced, but there isn't a good fit. And not to say that that person is bad or you bad, it's just that your vision or your values don't align, or how you want to do things don't align. And if that doesn't align, then you're not going to have a good working relationship. And then the person might leave, and staff turnover is a cost that you have to then pay. So I think that's some great advice there. But now you mentioned, you mentioned obviously, like I was saying, when you want to buy a car, you need to know your budget. But you mentioned, the person, you pick up the phone and you hear what their salary expectation is. So talking about that, how do you handle remuneration discussions? And I know that for health professionals, especially the allieds, like the OTs, the physios and that, this is a really difficult topic because they already hate talking about money in their business.
Oh.
Now they're talking about paying people. Lots of practices are paying people incorrectly, exploiting locums, things like that. But there are some who really want to do it properly, but they don't know how to have those conversations because they just hate talking about money. So how do you handle remuneration discussions? What's the best way to go about it?
Yeah, you know what, Tasneem, that is such a good question, and that's so accurate. That's one of the things that a lot of healthcare professionals don't like to talk about. It's like, and often we would get a job spec, and it's something like, I would like this as soon as possible. I want, let's say, occupational therapist to start November, and that's my job spec. And I'm like, okay, no salary, no working hours, no anything, and that make it really hard. So I think what people need to understand, and I'm not only saying this, but you cannot underpay a person. If you're unsure of what you need to pay the person, there's so many ways you can actually do homework. If I don't know, I go and I really go and do homework. There's so many wonderful sites on the web where you can go and compare salaries and stuff like that. What I do see often is, candidates speaking one another, to one another, and it's interesting. Some of them get paid so little and it's actually disgraceful almost, versus some get paid so well that everybody wish it's them, that type of thing. And once again, I'm now talking more about the admin staff. But even for the medical professionals, I really feel very strongly about medical professionals and qualified medical professionals. Even if you are young and you just step out of community service, or you just qualified and you step into the workplace, that they do not get exploited. And unfortunately, it does happen. Yes, they maybe not as experienced, and I understand where some of the practices come from, but it's crucial to really have that conversation up front. And I always try to speak to the practice owner up front so that I can put down a guideline or help them if possible and say to them, listen, you know what, I don't agree with that, or, I feel that's very low, so that when I present it to my candidate, I can do it comfortably. If I have to tell somebody they're going to get half the salary than what their peers are getting, or somebody with the same experience, I don't want to do that. I don't like that, because it's just not a fair, so I generally try and speak to the practice owner. And sometimes just because they didn't know, or they really do have a budget issue, but then I would sit with them and say to them, listen, I understand that's your, what's going on, but there's other ways to deal with this. Why not, let this person come in a few less days, or hours, or shorter days, or any other way to try and make up for that, because you do want to listen to both parties. And I do understand if you're a practice owner or a business owner, it's so hard. I mean, you want to pay people well, but it's not always possible. And but if the person that's stepping into that role is fully aware of it once again, and they understand, okay, this is why she's offering this, and I can see the potential, and I'm willing to take a chance on this. I mean, that to me is a fair negotiation. But if you know that the owner is sitting in Mauritius every holiday and they're paying you half of what you're worth, people start to get a little bit disgruntled and not happy, and they may be as well.
And I think I like to say, because in one of the things that I teach is that obviously you as a practice owner has to pay yourself a salary. So you also have to know what your salary, what your worth is, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes when I talk about how do you know when to start a practice, or like how to budget that in, if you use government salaries as a benchmark, obviously government salaries, they pay really well. There's lots of benefits. So you're not trying to match that, but that's a good benchmark to kind of guard against. So like if as an entry level OT at a school, you get paid, let's say 25,000 Rand a month, then how can you expect to pay an OT doing the exact same hours, the exact same job, all of that, like 10,000 Rand a month? The disparity is just too big.
Absolutely.
And then also, like you mentioned, something about like the budget, is that I think the problem is that practice owners, because they're not thinking like a business person, because they are clinicians at the end of the day, they often tend to do things wrong way around. So what they would do is they were like, oh, I need somebody, this is how much I can afford. But did they actually go back to the basics of actually looking at their business numbers? And have they actually created a budget and then actually budgeted in before you even need the person, before you even need somebody in your practice? You should already project that at some point I'm going to need to hire help, whatever that might be. Let me project. And even, in fact, I say, like, when you start out, you don't pay yourself a salary because you're just starting out, you're bootstrapping, right? So do you put in your projected budget that eventually I want to be able to pay myself, like, say, 20,000 Rand a month? So I'm going to put that in the budget, and my whole goal in my business is to generate enough revenue to cover expenses that includes paying myself a salary. Then I need to include now, let's say, an employee that's part-time and say, okay, that's 10,000 Rand a month because it's half-time. So now I need to increase my revenue even more to add. And so instead of, so by proactively budgeting to plan for being able to pay somebody fairly, as opposed to reactively saying, I need help because I'm not coping, but I'm actually not making enough money because I'm not running my business correctly from a financial point of view, then you are putting your business problem or poor business management onto the person and expecting them to almost like give you charity, basically, because you want them to give you the help, but you can't pay them. So I think that's often the big problem that comes in. Yeah. So now let's say you've now got the applications in, you've done shortlisting, you've now got an idea of how much you're willing to pay. That's a fair amount. And you do the interview process and you've found somebody you really like. What usually needs to happen then? I mean, you don't just say, okay, you got the job, and then the person starts the job. What is there a process that goes, when you recruit somebody, is there like a process to manage that transition from candidate to employed?
Yeah, absolutely. Often I see that people just say, oh, you know what, whoever's starting on Monday, and that's excellent, and a lot of people even accept that. And that to me is quite risky. But anyway, ideally, the practice need to just put a offer of employment, very basic. It's nothing difficult. You literally type an email or a letter that say, dear whoever, I enjoyed meeting you. I would like to employ you. And you just say, let's say, medical aid administrator, and this is the money, very basic hours. I will pay you 15 days leave. Yeah, please let me know if you accept or not. That's just a formality for this person that you can email to them. And then obviously they will accept or not accept. And from there on, if they do accept, you will do a formal contract. And this is something that even as a small business, it's so important to actually start your business correctly. Get yourself somebody that handle all those labor stuff if you can't do it yourself. A lot of people can do it themselves. You can do it yourself. It's not rocket science. A lot of people don't want to, but get a contract in place, because we trust everybody. We want to think everybody's honest and it's going to do the right thing both ways, but it doesn't always happen. And then you need a contract. So get that contract in place. It's crucial. It's crucial part of management and of growing your business is to make sure that your labor and everything else is in place when it comes to staff.
So you mentioned now about doing it yourself, contracts and things like that. But in general, the whole process is many different touch points. What would be the pros and cons of DIY recruiting versus going through an agency like yourselves?
Yeah, you know what? I think the process, a lot of people, what I find is actually quite interesting. A lot of people don't want people to know that they are recruiting. And they've got their different reasons for that. A lot of people kind of want to stay anonymous. And then they recruit. I think that we've got such a great database that we can often help people. Well, I've got somebody in mind that I actually spoke to whenever that I think will be perfect. Let me phone that person. So that's helping as well. A lot of people do think that recruiting, it does cost more. Let's just be honest. I mean, if you pay a recruiting fee, it does cost more. So that can be maybe a con for a lot of people, especially once again, and I always say this, as a small business, to fork out thousands of rands, sometimes it's just not feasible for a business. So there's definitely money implications. But yeah, I do think that, we also guide the person through the process and say to them, listen, you phone me, I'm interested in this candidate. It's like, excellent. Yeah, I've completed this offer of employment. Just make sure that you're happy with that. Can I send it to the candidate? Yes or no? And we deal with all of that. We don't always do the contracts. A lot of the practices prefer to do it themselves. But if somebody do ask us, we will assist them with that as well and get somebody to help them with their contracts and their labour administration and so forth. So yeah, I think in that regard, we can make it a lot easier for people to do that and just to guide them through the process, because there's often, misunderstandings. And I see this often that the candidate would say, but they said this to me, now they're offering me that, and we help with those negotiations and just make sure that everybody is on the same page.
So how does it work when you use a recruiting agency, like the costing? Do you pay up front? Do you pay for certain services and not for others? Or how does it work? So like I'm coming to you now and I want to employ you as an agency. What do you take me through?
Of course, I'm going to tell you what we do. We do it a little bit differently than a lot of other agencies. Just so you know, a lot of other agencies only charge percentage recruiting fees, and that generally varies between 15 and 20% of annual salary, which can be a bit pricey as well for people. But we've created a model where we actually do fixed fees. So we call them level 1 to 4. If somebody come into us, a level 1 would be, for instance, a dentist or a medical professional, and we've got a set fee. So that's the fee. If we find somebody for you that you do employ, that's going to be the fee. If we don't find somebody, or even if we do find somebody and you do not hire them for whatever reason, we do not charge you. So it's very low risk to practice, in my opinion. But you must be willing to, if that person starts and you employ them and you like them, that you will get a bill. In the month that they start. So if they start on the 1st of November, you'll get a bill within 2 weeks, and payments expected month end.
Okay. So you basically have to keep that in mind, that obviously the higher level person you're trying to employ, the more you're going to pay them, but you have them on tiers, as opposed to usually with an agency, the higher you are recruiting for, the more you're going to pay the agency. But you're saying you just have a fixed fee, but you've like marked them in tiers according to
that's right.
Profession.
Yes, that's right.
So, yeah.
Yes. So what we do is we charge literally, you will pay less for an administrator than for a medical professional.
Okay.
So yeah.
So, but also like what I'm hearing you say is that one of the biggest pros of using an agency is that they do a lot of the grunt work, which takes up a lot of time. The con is that you pay the money. But then again, it's that thing of if you getting ready to employ somebody, you are very overwhelmed. You don't have time. So do you have the time to now go through hundreds of CVs, do interviews, onboard the person? Like, do you have the time and deal with questions back and forth, setting up the contract? So I think it's a case of, like, if you work out, let's say your hourly rate is $7.50 an hour, and it's going to take you, let's say, 10 hours to recruit somebody. It will take a lot more, but let's just for mathematics sake, say 10 hours. That's 7,500 Rand that you are basically paying in your time to recruit somebody. So wouldn't you rather just pay somebody else to do it and you can carry on with your work? So I guess absolutely. It's a case of like return of investment, right? And if the person who you're hiring is actually going to lead to you increasing your revenue because of your increased efficiency, then maybe what you need to build in is whatever the amount you're paying the recruiter, how can you break that over a period of time that when you expect the return of your investment of having that person employed? So if you have capped your capacity in terms of how many clients you can see and you bring another practitioner in, how long will that practitioner have to work in order for them to bring in enough revenue for you to now cover the cost that you paid to the agency? Because I think the problem is a lot of our professionals think of the cost now, as opposed to, again, going back to the budgeting and thinking, okay, when am I going to get this money back? If I know I'm going to get this money back in like 6 months' time and I'm willing to wait that period, because after the 6 months, I'm now reaping the benefits, then you need to have that long-term view. But because we think kind of, well, I need somebody now, to do X, Y, and Z rather than fulfill a specific business need, that I think that's where the problems come in. Yeah.
Yeah, Tasneem, yes, I honestly want to say to you, that's definitely, if you employ somebody, they must, you must hire them with the idea of that they will create revenue for you. Because otherwise, and it can be looked at in different ways. Like you say, you've got more time, so you can consult more. You're going to, even if you make more money, because this admin lady is going to do the admin, that you sometimes sit in the afternoons and do admin. Now you can actually consult, for instance. So definitely you must be able to make up the money. And, most people actually do. If you hire the right person for your practice, it must grow. Otherwise, you're going backwards. That person must add value to your business and they must bring in revenue. And in fact, there's actually a formula, and I don't have it in my head, that you can actually work out how much extra they must do to kind of be worth it to actually have them in your practice. What I do want to add, and it's a very important point that I want people to actually think about, is that if, for instance, you are not a sole practice and you are an existing practice with a few staff members, if somebody that's really good and that do really well in your practice leave and you must replace them, okay, the cost of that is 6 to 9 months worth of that person's salary to retrain and invest in that person and to make them, come into the business. So if your staff member is asking you for 1,000 Rand more, or they are leaving you for a small amount to go somewhere else, you must keep that in mind. If that person is worth it and you want them and you like them and you don't want them to go, there's a few calculations you can make. It's not worth it to lose a person that's really good and that add real value to your practice for Rand, honestly, and I want people to keep their staff. I know as a recruiter, a lot of people will not believe me, but that's the reality. I want people to stay in practices. I want you to get so much value out of that person that you hired, that car that you bought on, we buy cars, like you said, that it's actually worth it. And in the long run, they stay with you for years and years. That to me, if I phone a practice and that person's still there, there's nothing like that. And it's like, oh my, what, it was the best match. I'm so happy they're still together. It's excellent. Yeah. And that's the way that I want people to think about their staff. This is a long-term investment. You don't want them to leave. You don't want to replace them every year. It's going to cost you way too much money.
Yeah. Excellent points. Thank you so much. I think we've ended off just when the thunder is going louder and louder and louder. So I think it's a good place to end off. The wonders of living in Johannesburg. In summer, it's like thunderstorms galore, and it's also getting darker outside. So thank you so much. I think it was really fascinating. I think people will learn a lot from it. So I will definitely be sharing all your information in the description box below the video so that people can reach out to you if they have any questions about your services or if they'd like to use your services. But yeah, if there's any last takeaways you'd like to share.
You know what, I'm going to almost say again what I just said before. It's like, take care of your good staff. They are worth it. Don't lose your good staff over a small disagreement or a few Rand. Keep them. You don't want to replace them unnecessarily. If you need to hire a new staff member, we would love to assist you. That's what we do. And we really actually care about our practices. And it's not all about making money. Although we are a business, we want you to really, really select the right person that's going to be with you for the long run. But yeah, thank you for your time, Tasneem. It was great talking to you. And yes, I appreciate your time as well.
Thank you so much. And I think also just for those who are listening who are not necessarily practice owners yet and they're still looking to work in private practices, I think they can also reach out to you because like you said, you build that database so that if there's somebody looking for somebody, you know who is on your books that might be suitable. So definitely go and check out the links below and get in touch with Erika. Thank you, Erika.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.